the objective of these webinars is, well, partially because we're all stuck at home. As you can tell that we're all sheltered in place, and so initially I thought, well, wouldn't this be great if we could get some of our authors together and talk about the big ideas in education informally. These aren't, structured presentations. They're more just a back and forth with an author who's got a big idea, and getting to talk a little bit about their ideas and their thinking about the classroom. Let me share some of the big ideas from the author that I'm going to introduce here in a second. Before I introduce her, if you go to the Proofrock Press website, I'm going to do that right now, and you search for Westfall, that's Laurie Westfall's, just type in Westfall in the search box, you'll get all over 40 titles that Laurie has done for Proofrock Press. They're different topics, but the big one is the differentiating instruction with menus. She's done a whole series that are for advanced level menus. And we're going to talk about what menus are in a second. She's done some for kids who are struggling learners as well in classrooms, so that you get an opportunity to differentiate using menus for all learners. She has several other books. One of the most exciting ones that we've got releasing just this season is this Stress-Free Science. That's coming out, well, actually, it's shipped over from China and is just about to hit the warehouse just in the next week or two. So that's a book we're really excited about. It's just a big fat science dictionary of terms and content in science. So Laurie's not just writing on the menus, but what we are going to be talking about today is the menu books. So let me introduce real quickly here Laurie Westfall. Laurie is as I mentioned, an author of more than 40 books. She's been in education for longer than 28 years. She has 15 years of classroom experience, both in the U.S. and abroad. And she is a gifted education consultant and science consultant nationwide, and a gifted ed coordinator. So welcome, Laurie. Thank you for being here.
Of course, it is my pleasure. Whenever I get the email that says, would you be interested in talking about things? I'm like, absolutely. I respond, I think, right away, probably within hours. I'm like, yes, please.
Yeah, you're one of the good eggs that's always up for a good conversation. I appreciate it, Laurie. Laurie, before we talk about what a menu is and get into some of that, let all of this, everything that you've done, I think, is undergirded with this philosophy of student choice. And I think in your book, you make the point that student choice encourages independence among kids. It allows them greater focus, and it's motivating. And I wanted to mention a third one, but can you talk a little bit, or fourth one? Can you talk about those three things: the independence, the motivation, the focus piece?
Sure. So you just put me on the spot with 3 words. I'm like, okay, I better write those down, so make sure I hit those 3, because there's so much more.
Okay. Well, no. Well, fair enough. Then you riff.
I will tell you, and one of the things I think anybody who has met me or has heard me speak about menus, and not even menus, just choice in general, will know that it's, like you had mentioned, it's a philosophy. It's like a personal philosophy for me, just because I was like, my parents brought me up to be independent with a lot of choice, and then they supported those choices. So I've seen what it looks like when you've been provided these opportunities to have a choice from a very young age. But there's a lot of research behind that too. But I'd like you to think about, like, those folks in the audience. I actually have a challenge for you. Joel didn't know I was going to do this, but I have a challenge for you. I'd like you, those of you who are watching, to think about this in maybe 10, 15 seconds. Do you believe that you are an effective decision maker? Or do you feel like when you have choices, you can embrace the choice and make a decision? I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Or 10 minutes. Oh my gosh. 10 seconds. And I want you to think about that just for a moment before we go on. So do you feel that you are an effective decision maker, or if you're provided with a choice, you embrace it, or is that challenging for you? We need a Jeopardy music.
Yeah.
Change that, right? All right. That was about 10 seconds. We're going with teacher 10 seconds. If you're a teacher, you know exactly what I mean by teacher 10 seconds. When we start looking at what I just asked you to think about, if you feel like you embrace choice, or if you feel like choice actually creates stress for you, I truly believe that has to do with how much choice you've been offered. And the more choice you're offered, the more effective, first of all, personally to you, that you tend to take choice. I love choice. If you don't give me a choice, it tends to actually make me more stressed if I don't have a choice. But I think as we start offering, like whether we look at what we're providing in our lives, what we're providing for our students, the idea of offering choice has built-in motivation. I don't know anyone who would not prefer a choice. If you go to a restaurant and they do have, right, the fixed menu where there's all the same things, it always makes me a little bit nervous because I'm like, what are they going to bring? I don't know if I'm going to like it. They have to determine what they think is best for me versus me determining what I think is best for me. So there's kind of that natural motivation to want to have choice. If you think about what your students are doing, especially middle school, high school, my secondary people, I taught middle school for many years. When we offer our students choice, they tend to, at least mine did, tend to care less about the grade and more about being able to do the activity, just because we offer choice. They tend to want to spend more time on those things. The quality is higher. And you mentioned motivation, of course, the motivation to do those things is higher as well. And whenever we offer choice, it's only natural. The only way that a child really, if they're going to accept a choice, I'm sorry, I'm like totally, and this is live too, which is bad. When we offer the children a choice and they make it their own, the side effect of that has to be independence because they're making the choice for themselves. So the three things you wanted me to talk about, motivation, focus, and independence, we're all kind of wrapped in there. It does all of those things. I think anybody in their classroom who is offered choice realizes those things. But I want to go back to what I had you think about just a second ago about being an effective decision maker. And throughout the years, and I've talked to audiences about this when I ask that same question, I ask them to think about if they feel that they're an effective decision maker and that they embrace choice, there should have been something they probably can identify that has helped them become stronger at making choices. And it's very interesting to talk to the audiences because I'll have teachers that are saying, yeah, no, that's not me. I don't want choice. It makes me nervous. I don't know how to do all these things. And then there'll be others who will say, oh, I used to be that way. And then this happened. And it was an opportunity for me to make a choice. And I was motivated to make the choice. And then it gives them the strength, as we said, for independence. It gives them this piece of independence that the next time they face a choice, they actually become better and better, if you will, at making them. And it's very empowering, right? Not just for children, but for adults as well. Just choice in itself is very empowering. So I think I answered your question and got the words that you were hoping to have in there. I got them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I had thought of something. I'd gone back and reread some of your books in preparation for this webinar. And I, in between their last webinar, and by the way, we did a webinar on menus specifically a while back. I wanted the audience to know that. And if you go to our past webinar recordings, you can just see that. We sort of deep dive into the menu system. In that webinar, and we'll talk about them here, but I wanted you to know that there's a full webinar on that. The other one was I had read not too long ago a book by Todd Rose called The End of Average, and he talks about, I would say 2E kids, but I think any kid who doesn't march to the same drummer as it would allow you to perform straight A's in school kind of kid, the rascals, the giving choice allows kids to figure out the coping systems that they're going to have. If you're a 2E kid, you're going to have to learn some coping mechanisms, whether that be that every time you hit a Shakespearean play, you're going to have to listen to it via audio. Those are the type of skills you just have to figure out yourself. Well, by building in a lot of different choices, kids have the opportunity to take risks and figure out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And by the way, just to clarify, when I said 2E and rascals in the same sentence, I didn't mean they're the same group. I just meant that there's a lot of kids who don't march to that school drummer, and I think choice is important for those kids.
I do know that, like, based on what you had just mentioned, what comes to mind is excuse me, something Carol Ann Tomlinson talks about when she discusses what is differentiation. And when we talk about what is differentiation, a lot of folks will believe that individualization is differentiation. And individualization is actually teacher driven with little choice, meaning the teacher is deciding this individual needs this. And I know we aren't necessarily talking specifically about differentiation, but it makes me think of that, because when you're offering choice to the child, that is a picture of differentiation. They're taking the instruction and making it their own. They're seeing it through their own lens. They're creating their own version. It very much meets those needs, especially when, and I, again, coming from my middle school perspective here too, but especially when the children don't necessarily show us everything, right? Some of our gifted children keep a lot inside, if we have our introverts as well. When we offer choice, and like you were talking about with those children, when choice is offered, you will see things from them that you would not have seen with what you designed. Because as you mentioned, they have their coping skills, they have different strengths, they have things that that we cannot. If I designed one activity, I would not be able to meet the needs unless that activity had choice and differentiation. But if I provided the same exact thing for everybody, it would be very difficult for those children to do that. Whether 2E, as you said, the rascals, the ones that do not fit directly in the boxes that we're setting in our educational system. I agree.
Yeah, yeah, and so to that point, I'm going to let you kind of riff a little bit too about
Well,
the menu system. But let me show folks that some of what you built and give some examples of some of the kinds of things. Because when we're thinking about what are menus and what is their use, we got a wild dog.
I'm sorry, here and thundering. So
No, that's understandable. I've got two kids downstairs. I got a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, so we're all just like waiting for something to go off. Let me shift over to the screen share here so I can show the folks what we mean when we're talking about menus. Let me find my Acrobat. So what Laurie's done is built a sort of a framework for choices in the classroom, and she's got a lot of different kinds of menus that you can use. And she can talk a little bit about those. But the idea is it's a structured way to give kids choices about their learning outcomes in the classroom. Now, you've got your standards and you've got your content that needs to be taught. We're talking about some things that kids can do to show that they've achieved the standards, that they've learned the content. And so, she gives examples in the grade 3 book. We've got examples of some of the kinds of projects that the kids can do or products that the kids can do. She includes in the books sort of specifications for what those products might look like. What if a kid were to develop to these specifications, they would have this product and it would look great. She also provides rubrics for how you can evaluate the kind of projects that the kids are choosing to do, and that way you've got a system for assigning the quality level of the project. Let me give you a few examples of some of the kinds of menus that Laurie proposes. Here's her 2, 5, 8 menu system, and so the kids choose. It has total 10 points, right, Laurie?
that's correct.
Yeah, so they can choose different things that they can do in the classroom to achieve this. And so now this is a 3rd grade level kind of projects. Let me show you middle school. This is the list menu. Now this is actually high school. This is from the algebra book, I
Yeah.
think. So we've got, write a T-chart of measurements that are scalar and vector, and you get points for doing each of these projects, and you have to get up to 100. So you don't have to do them all. You just do the ones that are going to add up to your 100 score. And built into all of these are higher order thinking skills and the opportunity for the kid who has a certain learning preference to choose the best match for them in terms of the outcome that the kid is going to show their learning. Here's one from middle school. This was geography, and this is the Tic Tac Toe approach. What was it? Explain this one, Laurie.
The Tic Tac Toe.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to explain its organization?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm giving you the information you'd like. If you will put the picture back up, though, I think that might be helpful.
I will. Let me do that.
just because that way I can give it. I got to be careful when I get into these meetings. I get close to look at the screen and then everybody looks up.
Right.
Okay. I'm sorry. I will stand back and look from a distance. The Tic Tac Toe menus. This is probably one of the most common formats. It actually was made popular in Susan Weinbrenner's book. They call it the Orange Bible, if you will, about meeting the needs of gifted children in the regular classroom. And she had extension menus. This one is a little bit different in the sense that I've taken that model and really kind of bumped it up in some different ways. So if you take a look at the menu that's here, I do have the rule for Tic Tac Toe menus that the children can only go across or down, no diagonals. And if you take a second and look at this menu, you probably will be able to see some of the different things that are integrated into the menu that makes that a rule. So for example, if you were to go from, so I'm directing, like I'm pointing at it, if you were to go from the upper left box that says our landforms and go to the lower right in that diagonal, you would see that the children would do 3 products about our landforms. So we want to make sure that when we do a tic-tac-toe menu, and actually when they do any menu, by the time they complete the menu, that the children have completed one activity from each of the objectives that that menu covers. This United States geography menu actually covers 3 objectives. It covers the landforms, it covers the climate, and it covers natural resources. So when the children go across or down, they're getting one of each of those content areas, or those objectives, I'm sorry. The other things that are incorporated here that you would have to look a little bit more deeply is Bloom's levels are incorporated here. When the children go across or down, they're getting a lower level activity, a middle level activity, and a higher level. And then there's also learning preferences. So when they go across or down, they're getting something visual written, they're getting something verbal, and something tactile. So if you are someone, it's funny, when I talk about menus with teachers, this is usually when their jaw falls open, because they go, I've been making these for years and I've just never thought of that. Now, I will tell you, there are other menus, there are other tic-tac-toe menus out there that don't take all of this into account. But when I was doing, you're going to hear a siren probably go by now. I just cannot believe today.
No, that's fine, Laurie.
Like, there it goes. But for me, this is probably something I think from coming from teaching 8th grade. 8th graders, for the most part, are not overly interested in school. They're not overly interested in whatever we're trying to teach them. Choice is something that they are very, very interested in. It gets them engaged. They want to do it, and the content comes along for the ride. But the problem was I needed to be very selective in what I offered. Meaning I needed to make sure that whatever I offered would get what I needed it to be. Because if it got too fluffy, or if it wasn't as robust as it could be, then I was getting all this energy from my students, and it just wasn't where it could have been. So when I first saw the tic-tac-toes, I went, you know what, these are great. My students love them. I'm like, they really like this, but I think I can get more out of it, right? I mean, if they're going to put forth the effort and I can actually get these students to complete it, I want to make sure it's as best as it can be. So I looked at it. All of my menus incorporate, I call them the 3 L's. You've got learning styles, you've got whatever objectives, the learning objectives, and you've got the levels of Bloom's. So no matter which menu you do for me, by the time the children have completed it, they've met all of those criteria. And the tic-tac-toe is probably the one that's most easily visible to see how that's organized. All of the others have that. It just may not be as obvious.
That makes sense. And in that, like, let me go back to that, because with the tic-tac-toe, for example, because the kids can only go across or up and down, you can control the standards. You can hit different objectives by organizing the tic-tac-toe properly. That a kid will have to hit every one of your objectives. They can't, mix and match kind of thing. Everything's covered.
And there's something, and this might be news to some of the teachers in our audience, but if there is a path of least resistance, the children will find it. So we have to make sure that when that menu is designed, that just doesn't exist. Like, for example, if you bring up that 258, if you don't mind, I'll share something with you. It's frustrating for children, but this is something for you to think about when you offer choice. The 258, Our goal here is 10 points. By the way, middle school teachers, middle school, high school, this is 20, 50, 80. Okay, same thing, we just add a 0, and the total's for 100. But I want you to think about this. There's a rule, if you will, in the way that I design these, and that is there should not be any more than two 2-point products. Now, if you think about why that rule is, right, the goal is 10, and there can't be any more than 2 2s. So Joel, here's the question for you. What would your students do if I had more than 2 at the lowest level? I put you on the spot. You didn't know I was going to ask that.
Yeah, well, listen, I had kids that were very clever at figuring out the very least that they could do. So any combination would get them what is the least I can do to get it? What is literally the least I can do?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's what imagine even if we had, that's it. Imagine if we just added one more at 2-point level, then they could do those 3 that are the lowest level of blooms and a mediocre 5 and hit the goal. So all of these menus, even if you don't put the choices on a menu, okay, for me, I'm a very logical, sequential person. So for me, menus it makes it very easy for me to see and understand what's going on. I would have appreciated them as a child, as a student. But when we look at all of those designs, whether it's a tic-tac-toe that it goes across, whether it's a shape made, whatever it is, we have to look at the way that our students are going to use it. And we want to make sure that we are lovingly forcing them to go to the higher levels. So if we offer another option, they will take that. But what's interesting is, like on that 258, my students will look and say, oh, okay, I'll do these 2 2s. Then if I do another 5, I still don't have enough points. So I may as well just do 2 5s. The cool thing about this menu, though, a lot of my students choose to do a 5 and an 8. And yes, that's more than 10. But one of the important things to consider with this, and consider with menus, consider with choice, in anything in general that we're doing with this, we expect to have high quality things created. They're choosing it. So if they're choosing it, that means that they should be willing to put the work in to get that done. However, that does not mean these are completion grades. I do not use any menu that I've designed as completion grades. You could design one that way, but it would look a little bit different. But when we say that something is worth 10 points, it needs to meet the criteria to be worth 10 points. And sometimes our students need more information about that, because they're used to, here, let me just give you something and call it done. And for me, that's, if you're choosing it, then I feel like I can have a higher expectation of you because you chose that. So the quality needs to be there, and it needs to meet the criteria that we're looking for.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I'll, before we start talking a little bit about remote learning, let me mention too that there's different ways that teachers use the menus. One way, if you've got kids who don't have a lot of background knowledge about the content you're going to teach, is it's an advanced organizer. The kids pick the things that they're going to do, and then that can lead their information gathering throughout the unit of instruction. It can replace some of the activities, and you can even set up centers in the classroom and that sort of thing, so that these activities are replacements for little pieces of your curriculum unit. And then sometimes they're like little mini lessons, and that's for kids who have a lot of knowledge about the topic going into the thing, and then they can just use the menus as mini lessons. Does that kind of capture the different ways you might use the menus in a classroom?
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Yes. First of all, the quick answer is yes. Okay. But the other secret answer to that is I will always have people ask me when I'll talk about menus, they'll get all excited, and they will have the question for me that says, could I design a menu to blank? Whatever's in the blank. The answer to that is yes. Whatever's in that blank. It's just, you have to take some of the design tools into account when you design it. I know we're talking about the classroom, but on a personal level, for some of you who are tuning in, if you will, I've had parents design menus as well to help organize student activities, meaning you have a child who's involved in all of these different activities. Parents have organized menus or have designed menus for chores, for activities, for vacation planning. A menu is simply a tool, right, to organize choice. That's all it is. So when you have opportunities or things are coming up, that you can offer choice. All the menu does is make it clear and obvious. That's all. And
Ah,
it makes it more manageable for us as teachers. So
that's a great explanation. Yeah, thank you for that. Let me move us a little bit on to, I mean, I know at your school district, you guys are doing a lot of remote learning right now. You're also in contact with folks around the country who've been using menus as part of their remote learning learning opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on out there and how teachers are using menus, but also student choice even as part of this challenge of remote learning that we've hit?
right. I will tell you, and I know that's probably why we have like the huge audience that we have, hopefully today, is because you're looking for something that can help you with your online learning. Um, this is probably one of the most obviously unique situations we've ever been in, but this is an incredible situation to offer choice, because I know in online learning, in both in our district, and then like I said, I've been in contact with some other districts that are implementing menus as well. It is difficult because you have your classroom virtually, which means that you can't see every child looking at something and struggling. And you know, I could look across my classroom, I could explain something, look across my classroom and go, didn't get it. And let me either rephrase or figure out how I'm going to go help them. That piece is missing for us right now. I know you can do office hours. A lot of districts are doing pure virtual, so there's really no synchronous instruction. And I think when we have that type of situation, we need to offer some choice in what we're providing. So whatever our unit or our content is, we can look at it and say, okay, I know that I'm going to have some children that are going to need this review. I know I'm going to have some that are here. I know that I have some already knew this at the beginning of the year. And what am I going to give them? But the lockdown, or not the lockdown, that's the wrong term, but the shelter in place that we have right now.
It feels like lockdown.
I'm sorry, I used the wrong word. It felt like that. With our gifted children especially, and the idea of the COVID and all of this, our gifted children especially overthink things. And I've heard people tell me recently, hey, my gifted, this is when they really should be pushing. In theory, yes. I don't know though, because I know adults who are struggling with anxiety. And just because of, I mean, they're afraid to step out the door. I mean, these are adults, and we have children who are experiencing this too. And then the structure isn't there and the rhythm is gone. So this is one of the perfect times to, as we would say, we don't assume who can do what. So if we provide some choices within any lesson, some of our gifted children might actually prefer to do the review as a start, just so they can feel confident, right? Oh, okay, I know I can do this one. And then they can progress to something else. I know that, and it all depends on your district or your situation, how the online learning is taking place. I am hoping that by this point as a teacher, if you are a teacher, that you have some opportunities to personalize, differentiate what you're offering. And anytime that we can offer choice in what's being provided, the children are more likely to feel less stressed and more comfortable with what they're doing or what they're providing for you. And I think our traditional analysis of what's going on in our classroom has really changed, which means that we have to really allow the children more opportunity to make the learning their own. And I really feel, I mean, obviously I'm on a soapbox about choice in general, but I really feel like that's one of the most successful ways to do that. I've had children who don't participate, who will participate in choice. So an online situation, depending on what you would have to think obviously about what it would look like in your format. In the format that we have, each course that the children go into, there's a folder. Within that folder, there's other folders. It's just a folder of folders in this particular organizational system. But even within that, we can offer choice. We communicate it to the students and say, I want you to look at all of these and pick the one thing that you want to do. And they can work on that. So I've totally, I think, gone all the way around our topic here. But I think choice is the perfect thing to do during this time, not just because choice is good, But because we have children who are in different situations, they may have internet access once a week. They might be stressed and anxious. They may have family members who are ill. The crazier the situation is, the more choice needs to happen, because we don't know and we can't predict. So if we offer choice, they can make it work for them.
That makes sense. And I will get to a little bit more discussion of the online and remote learning as we get into the questions, because I think that's coming up in the Q&A too. Let me pause for a second. And while I'm going to encourage the audience to upvote questions and add any questions during this little 30 seconds here that I'm going to take to do a little bit of sales. If you, I mentioned this at the beginning when I introduced Laurie, if you go to the Proofrock Press website, you will see all 40 plus of the books that she's done. The Differentiating Instruction with Menus books, essentially what they provide you an explanation of the choice system, the menu systems, different kinds of menus, and then it gives you sort of exemplars, templates of different menus that you can use in the classroom, and ways to evaluate those menus. The idea is these are exemplars that eventually you'll be incorporating your own into the classroom. This just gives you a good guideline to get started. These books are available obviously at proofrock.com, but you can get them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you like to shop for your books. Let me switch over real quick, and I'm going to give you Laurie's contact information for those of you who would like to reach out to her. Laurie Westfall has her own website, giftedconsultant.com. She's got her email address there. And I'm going to leave this up for just a sec so you guys can take any notes that you'd like to before we get into the Q&A. She's GT Consultant on Twitter. You can reach out to her there as well. So feel free to use any one of those methods. Take a little screenshot now, because I'm about to shoot over to turn this over to Stephanie. Stephanie, can you take over and help us with the Q&A, please?
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, so our first question, with distance learning, I'm finding that my struggling learners are really motivated and trying very hard, whereas my gifted learners are not giving much effort. Any insights into that?
I will say, and I've heard this from so many people recently, and I think part of what's happening is, especially if, by the way, your spring break was extended a week or 2 weeks before online learning happened, right? A lot of our gifted children look at this and say, look, I want to learn what I want to learn about. And in their mind, I think they were thinking, hey, this is great, I have some time off. And a gifted child rarely actually takes time off, right? I mean, their brain is always thinking about something. So I think part of what you're seeing is the gifted children want to do their own thing. There's also a phrase I've used all the time about, and it's a personal statement as well, about giftedness in school. A lot of our gifted children, by the time they're in second or third grade, have learned to play school. They come to the building, they do what the teacher wants, they give the teacher what they want, and then they get to do what they want to do. And our children are not always, since our children are not going to a physical building, the structure has changed. And for them, their home is usually the place they get to explore their own talents. Like, they get to do what they want to do, and there's experiences there for them. So I think what we're seeing happening is many, and not just yours, I'm sure, many gifted children are confused, shall we say that, because home is not where I play school. Home is where I get to do what I want to do. So as far as insight on that, something you can do, providing that the children will at least engage, and sometimes they don't even want to get online, but if the children will at least get online, you can take a menu. Take an easy one, because they're not necessarily going to understand the value of the points. So take like a 3-shape menu or a Tic Tac Toe menu, and work with a group of children who are not necessarily engaging, and have them come up with a menu of what they want to do. So let's say that they want to investigate something at home. How can I tie whatever, and you're going to have to be creative. How can I tie what they want to do into the content that I am teaching? Now, something to consider. Do the children already know the content? It's possible. And if they already know the content, then have them make a menu of something that they want to learn about at home. If they don't know the content, how can I tie the two together? I just want to play games. All right, well, here's a game that is about this content. So you can bring them in to, and it depends on the grade level, of course, but that would be my first step, would be to meet with them, talk with them, say, look, you know, we got to play school. You need to be here you need to do school. This is a requirement, but I want to work with you. If you already know some of this stuff, or if you have other interests, you know, let's work on it. And depending on the children, especially if you've built that rapport, they'll be like, okay, I know. And then they'll start, you know, you'll hopefully get more response.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That's helpful. Yeah. Another question. One of the issues we're struggling with is that some of our GT kids cannot make a choice when offered choices. They want to do a couple of options and they shut down if they have to pick just one.
I would ask a clarification on that one. So, so I'm going to have you read it again, Stephanie. So I heard making choices, but then it said what?
They want to do a couple of options and then they shut down if they can't, or when they need to pick just one.
Oh. Okay. Okay, you're not going to like my answer. Whoever wrote it, I'm not going to apologize, but you're probably not going to like my answer. Why do they need to pick just one? So that's my first question. You will notice that when the menus are given and we talk about it, it's at least 10 points, at least 100 points. I've done menus where the goal is 100 and children do 400. They're just really interested in the content. Now, here's the thing. If the goal is to teach them choice making, which I understand, right? My goodness, elementary teachers, I don't know if this has changed, but when I taught elementary and we had to have the children decide what they wanted for lunch, right? Like the morning we had to give the lunch count. Yes, it was not pleasant. And then by the time the children went to lunch, they couldn't remember what they had chosen, right? Because they didn't anyway. So there's those types of choices. So if the purpose is to have children be better decision makers and make choices, then that's a different story. And if they want to do two, then you maintain the rule that they can only do one. And if that's the reason, right? If that's the true reason is I want them to develop choice making skills, then you have to like stand your ground and say it's only one. You can go through different choice making strategies. You can do think alouds. If I were this, I would pick this, or I would pick that. If it's something where they're going to pick one this week and pick one another week, then you could say, if it's a product type of thing, I really want to do this product. Maybe in the future, next week, something will come up. There's a lot. Choices are something that nowadays, the majority of our children have not been exposed to choice, first of all. It's not the same world that I grew up in, where they send you out and say, come home when the lights turn on. We can't do that, which means that when our children hit elementary school and even go into middle school, sometimes they've never had a choice. So when we offer one, they shut down. Some of them will shut down and say, I can't make a choice, tell me what to do. Some of them will say, I must do these two because I can't pick between them. That's where our opportunity to educate on making choices, tell them a personal story. I remember I went to the restaurant and I really wanted this and I really wanted that. I didn't know what I was going to do. So, what kind, just talk them through that type of thing. But it is going to be it's going to be a commitment on your part, meaning the children it's going to take a while. This is not going to be, I'll do it once and it's going to be fixed. This is, I'm going to do it once and then I have to support them multiple times until they become better at making those decisions. And I know I know that Joel had put my email up there. If the person who asked that one, if I didn't answer the question or you have a specific situation, send me an email. I'm happy to answer that further just because I'm not sure of the reasoning behind it, which would change like my advice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And let me intervene here real quickly because I did see a question also about some of the templates that we shared earlier in this thing. If you will go to Laurie's website, she has an area on her website where you can download some free samples of menus and that sort of thing. So it'd be hard for me to email them out to you guys because there's all different levels and all that kind of thing. But if you'll just go to her website, you can find samples of that. Sorry to interrupt, Stephanie. I was looking at those questions.
The other thing, Joel, I was going to mention when you shared the email address and also talked about the books. In the back of the book, it has my email address as well in the about the author. But one of the things that I offer to anybody really at any time is if you are interested in the blank templates. So it has the instruction and then it has like the skeleton, no like content on it yet. send those to you. They're ideas, so they're not copyrighted. If you drop me an email, I will send you, the entire bunch. What I do is I send you a link to a Dropbox where they're all located. No content in them, but it has the instructions, it has the format. So you just type your own content in, and a lot of people appreciate that. So I am happy to send those to anybody who asks for them as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Laurie, because I do think that's something to stress, is that your book are supposed to be exemplars for people, with the idea that they're just platforms that eventually you'll launch and do your own content and that kind of thing. So Stephanie, maybe we have time for maybe one more question.
Yeah, this builds on what you were just saying about using templates, but how can I take the menus you've created in your books to make them more content specific and meet the depth and rigor of mandated learning objectives?
What I would suggest you do is, again, it's all centered around the 3 L's. So if you find what's there and you want to make it deeper, depending on what menu format you're looking at, all right? So here would be the way to analyze any of the menus in my books. Look for how the learning objectives are placed in the menu. So the one that Joel had shown earlier, it was a 3-topic list. So it had 3 sections. Each of those is a different learning objective. So you would look for how the learning objectives are organized. So then you could take your deeper learning objectives and use them in the same locations, if you will. The second thing to look for is how the learning preferences are incorporated. So if you see something on my menu that's a play, you can go to that list that Joel showed you and pick a different kinesthetic activity that fits what you want to do. So the learning is still, the preference is still there. The other thing to look for is higher order thinking. So if you're doing a point-based menu, that's easy enough. The points are related to the levels of blooms. If you're looking at a target-based menu, that's the meal menus, the 3 shapes, the Tic Tac Toes, you'll have to kind of dig in there and see what the low, middle, and high, they're located, so that when you design your version of that, taking what I have and making it deeper or more complex, you can still keep that. Even when you go deeper and complex, there still should be levels of blooms. Even if we're in an AP physics class, there still should be different levels of knowledge, because not every child is in the exact same place. So you could take the menu, look for those 3 L's on mine, use that to change the content to match what you need. So then you would still have all of those things incorporated.
You know, Stephanie, I said one more, and then I saw Rebecca's question and thought it was a pretty strong question too. Having it incorporated both classroom management and also resource management. And do you see Rebecca's question there? Could you pose that one?
Yes, sure. I've tried to use some of your books on menus for indirect services for gifted students. I have difficulty managing it with students in the regular classroom. For supplies, Q&A, I would appreciate any hints on managing menus.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'll have to look at the question again. Is the question about using menus to manage materials? I'm sorry, I heard it. Make sure I'm understanding it.
Yeah, let me read again.
I think it was getting at the classroom management of, you've got like in a classroom, you've got this mix of kids and they're all doing different things, and you've got different, the kids have got different materials, and just how do you kind of wrangle all that?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I thought, because we could design a menu for that, so that's why I'm like, okay, that I have done that. Okay. I'm trying to think of the best succinct answer. First of all, you can use a menu whole class, right? You could design a menu, there's different ways to do this. You could design a menu, one menu that everybody does. Even if you have multiple levels in your classroom, you still can do that. You also could design, like I'm picturing, I don't know what the grade level was that was associated with this, but I'm also, you can design leveled menus. Meaning I can have this menu for these students, this menu for these students, and this menu for these students. You can actually design them to look exactly the same, like the skeleton is exactly the same. Some of the activities are the same, but otherwise they're different. So you can do that by ability level. If you want to use this with everybody, as far as managing those and managing menus, it would depend on how you plan to use them in your classroom. I will say probably one of the biggest suggestions I have about menus in general, first of all, is children seem to perceive menus as like chocolate chip cookies. You do not want to like give, like if I walk into the classroom and give 3 chocolate chip cookies to 3 students, it creates problems. So when you look at management, how you want to provide them, the first thing is, how can we have everybody be able to do one? So to give you an idea of how I could manage this, first of all, menus should always be given before instruction takes place. I know that this seems counterintuitive, but it actually will be the driving force for that unit or that lesson, you know, if the lesson goes a few days. So the children come, when the lesson begins or the unit begins, you talk to the children about the menu. You have some different options in how you introduce this. Depending on grade level and how ready the children are, you can introduce the entire menu. And what you're doing is you're going through and you're talking about products and you're building excitement, you're doing the. Once they've done that, then as the lessons progress through the unit, the children have something to immediately tie the knowledge to. So in other words, as they come in and we're talking about something, hey, remember this could help you with your menu on that. So it would be kind of the way that everything that they do, is going to contribute to the menu that they're working on. If you have multiple levels in one classroom, and it sounds like in this question they do, and their GT doesn't seem to have a problem, they probably have already embraced the choice. They're a little bit more independent, and then we have some others that are not. If we want to use the same menu with everyone, one of the things you can do, one of the things I recommend you do, is use, like, let's say that we have, if it's early elementary, let's say that we have a 3-shape menu. This is a menu Joel didn't show it, but the name gives it away. It has like 3 circles, 3 diamonds, 3 squares, just 3 different shapes. And we design the menu, but then we can cut it apart. So we will have a strip of circles, a strip of diamonds, and a strip of squares. And I can give just the strip, the top one, the strip of circles, to all of my students. And that's pick 1 of 3, which, by the way, helps those children who are not necessarily comfortable with choice. As they finish that, they can bring it back to you, and then you give the next strip. They finish, come back to you, they give the final strip. The reason why this is so beneficial when you have multiple ability levels, our gifted children might be able to finish that circle. By the way, that's usually a lower level activity, but they can finish that circle quickly and move on. Some of our other students need more time on the circle. So by kind of cutting the menu apart and giving smaller amounts of choice, it makes everyone's working on the menu, but they're all working at a different level without it seeming like they're working at a different level. I'm hoping that makes sense. It always may make sense in my head. But that's a way that will help organize how we can have the children do different things. If you have a special education student whose IEP asks for or requires shortened assignments, one of the neatest things that you can do is use a point-based menu. And our point-based menus, the goal might be 100. For our special education student, the goal is 70. It's a shortened assignment, but I am not giving them something different. Meaning, a lot of times for our special education students, for shortened assignments, we cross things out. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. And for me, when I started using menus this way, some of my special education students chose some of the most difficult products. They just had more time to do it, and they did incredibly well. So if you have special education students, we might do shortened assignment. If your question was, as I'm just now thinking about it, about managing the supplies to create it, I'm like, I should have thought about, maybe that's what the question meant. I apologize, Stephanie. I think that's who she said the question was from. For supplies, the products that we do, or the products that I've included in the book, are all kind of low-tech, basic supply stuff that we should have. And what I did in my classroom to facilitate that is I had a table that was just with supplies. So it had all the supplies that they could use. I also had, this is what I called it, the Island of the Misfit Toys box. Meaning that some of my students would build things, or they would bring a product in and then they wouldn't take it home. I'm like, they did all that stuff to create it, and they're like, yeah, no. So we would actually take them apart and put it in a box. So I also had a box under my table that had just stuff, like stuff that was left over from other products that we had cannibalized, right, and put in the box. We had that. As children were working on things, some of the things I suggest is, for example, anything that has moving parts or that other children can mess with had to be put in a shoebox with a lid. So when the children would bring it in, they could write the name on the end, and then we could stack it. I found that mobiles and dioramas and things like that that were brought in with pieces, by the time they got to share it, someone had touched it. So it had to be brought in a shoebox. We've also, for the papers, I talked to our local, it was a mom and pop type place, but I talked to our local pizza place. They gave us pizza boxes, like the largest, and we put the children's name on the end. So anything that was flat or fairly large could be put in a pizza box, and then we stacked those up. There are a lot of ways we get creative, right? One of the suggestions I have for you, and Stephanie, I don't know what grade level you were talking about. That would be another thing as well. But one of the things I have always done when it comes to supply management, or, you know, a lot of things with this throughout the years, a lot of the ideas I have come from my students. And I've just talked to them about it. Guys, you're bringing that's where the shoebox came from. Guys.
She says 3rd and 4th grade.
Perfect. That's a good year. That it will work with them. Thank you, Stephanie. So I would talk to them about it and say, we're having problems. You know, I had told them, we can't do this menu right. We can't do another menu unless this is fixed. And that's where the ideas come from. Like I said, they were touching the dioramas and they were breaking. And I told them, we can't do this anymore. And one child said, well, it was in a shoebox anyway, right? It just didn't have the lid. They're like, what if everything that had parts we just put in shoeboxes? I'm like, that's a great idea. So
that is a great idea. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we can have the best ideas, and your children will find, like we said, the loopholes, right? They will find what issues might be there. And I would say, ask them. And Stephanie, you have my email. So send me an email if it's something specific that you're asking about. I've done them before they were menus, and I've talked to so many teachers over the years that have given me suggestions, so I can be a little bit more specific as well if you just want to drop me an email.
Oh, good. That's very nice of you. Well, let me wrap this up a little bit. First, let me thank Stephanie McCauley, my editor, for handling the Q&A. She's with me here not here. She's at her house. But we do these every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. And again, they're informal, just get-togethers. You can go to our website, and on the main page, there's a webinars listing, and you can see which ones we're doing that week. And you can join us and watch my hair grow. I can't get a haircut. So,
no haircut.
But so thank you, Stephanie. Laurie, thank you so much for doing this. I sure appreciate you coming here. Thank you.
Of course.
And thanks everybody for coming, and we'll hopefully see you next Tuesday. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.